What happens when a promise to heal you turns into a years-long nightmare? Today, we're going to walk through the story of Air Force veteran Michael Stewart, documented through his own medical records. It's a journey into a really complex system that, at the end of the day, makes you ask, where does the buck stop when things go this catastrophically wrong?
And this is what's at stake. In his own words, Michael Stewart said his situation effectively rendered me helpless to make a living. That just hits you, right? It's a powerful reminder that behind every claim number and medical chart, there is a real human being, a family, and a future just hanging in the balance.
So, where did this all kick off? Well, like so many of these stories, it starts with an injury and the promise of a surgical fix that would make everything better.
Okay, so let's lay out the timeline here. It starts with a bad car accident back in 2019. First, the VA does a laminectomy to relieve some pressure, and it helps a bit. But the big one, the one that was supposed to be a permanent fix, was a spinal fusion in August of 2021. And that surgery, well, that's the moment that sets everything else in motion. But after that hope for a permanent fix, the records, they start telling a totally different story. The recovery just wasn't going as planned, and some pretty serious warning signs started popping up right there inside the VA's own system. And you won't believe how early the first red flag shows up. Just 2 months after that major fusion surgery, a VA radiologist looking at a CT scan spots something. The report specifically mentions potential issues with the hardware, noting lucencies along the screws. So what in the world does that actually mean? Well, to put it simply, a lucency is a gap. It's a little shadow on the scan that basically screams, hey, these screws might be loose. It's a sign the bone isn't grabbing onto the hardware like it's supposed to. It is a clear, objective warning that the surgery might be failing. Now, fast forward nearly 2 years after that scan. With his condition getting worse and worse, Michael Stewart sends this secure message to the VA. You can just feel the sheer desperation in his words. This isn't just a patient dealing with pain. This is a man terrified he's going to be paralyzed, pleading for someone to listen. And how did the system respond to that desperate plea? Well, a neurosurgery referral was ordered, but weeks later, the records show it was just stuck. It hadn't even been processed. As he's fearing paralysis, his file is literally just sitting in a queue somewhere. And those delays, they had devastating real-world consequences. By August of 2023, his decline was sharp. He's now being evaluated for a wheelchair because of weakness in his legs. He actually argues with them, saying he needs a power chair, not a manual one. That's how bad he felt it was. And get this, a physical therapist looks at him and decides he's gotten so much worse that he's not even a candidate for therapy anymore. He was too sick for therapy. All of this, it was all building to a breaking point. What had been this slow, agonizing decline was about to explode into an absolute, life-threatening emergency. And in June of 2024, that's exactly what happened. The situation became critical. He was rushed to an outside hospital with what the surgeons called progressive motor and sensory dysfunction. He was losing strength and feeling in his legs so fast that the surgeons knew they couldn't wait another second. Now, once they got into the operating room, wow, they discovered the source of the problem. And the details in the report are pretty graphic. They said the tissue had a woody texture, and when they finally cut through all that scar tissue, a significant amount of purulent material, which is just a medical term for infectious pus, poured out of the wound. How much? 400 cubic centimeters. I mean, to give you an idea, that's almost a full can of soda. A massive, hidden infection had been festering in his back this whole time. The aftermath was just intense. First, they had to do this extensive cleaning of the wound. Then came a massive revision surgery. And we're not talking a small fix. They had to fuse a huge part of his spine, from his mid-back all the way down to his pelvis. The whole thing was so hard on his body, he had to be moved to the ICU, intubated, and sedated. So the big question is, how on earth did it get this bad? This is where we start to zoom out and connect the dots from that first surgery in 2021 to this emergency in 2024, putting the whole system under the microscope.
An expert medical witness, a spinal surgery specialist named Dr. Joseph David, reviewed the entire case, and his opinion is blunt. He alleges multiple breaches in the standard of care. He points directly to the failure to act on that early CT scan and the delays in getting Stewart to a specialist, delays that he says directly led to this catastrophic infection and the need for that unbelievably massive surgery.
And a story like this doesn't just happen in a vacuum, right? It's often a symptom of a much bigger problem. And when you look at the VA's own survey data on staffing, it's just staggering. 96% of facilities say they need more staff. More than half the current staff say they have less time for patient care. When you see numbers like that, a delayed referral stops being just a piece of paper. It's a symptom of a system stretched to its absolute breaking point.
And it's not just about not having enough staff inside the VA. Michael's case was handled through the community care program, the one that's supposed to give veterans more and better options outside the VA. But a government watchdog report found this very program has a huge flaw. It doesn't have a good process for weeding out doctors who provide poor quality care. It just makes you wonder who exactly is watching the watchers. So after everything, the emergency surgery, the massive fusion, Stewart filed a claim for additional disability benefits. He argued that the VA's inaction made his condition so much worse. And this was the system's final verdict. In November of 2024, the VA denied the claim. The official letter states, quote, standard care was provided, and that his outcome was due to an event that could not have reasonably been foreseen. They called it an uncontrollable event. And this slide right here is the heart of the entire story. You have two completely different narratives. On one side, the VA's official conclusion, standard care is provided, it was an uncontrollable event. And on the other side, the evidence from their own records. A warning on a CT scan way back in 2021, months of documented delays, and a 400cc infection that led to a life-changing surgery. So we're left with this really tough question. When you can see a patient's health spiraling down over years, with clear warning signs in the record, where does a problem you can control end, and an uncontrollable event begin? How does a system like this measure responsibility when a person's life is forever and completely changed?